The trap was waiting for them at Nexus Station, the largest slave market in the Outer Rim. Jake should have known it was too easy when the Vorthic trader contacted him directly, offering to sell 50 Lyrians at once. The price was too good, the location too convenient, the whole deal too perfect, but they had to try. 50 Lyrians was more than they had rescued in the past year combined. Even knowing it was dangerous, Jake could not ignore the chance to free so many of Zara's people at once. "It is a trap," Roy said over the comm, as their small fleet approached the station. Along with the Lucky Strike and Roy's cargo hauler, they now had 3 other ships crewed by freed Lyrians and sympathetic humans. Every instinct I have is screaming, "Danger! Of course it is a trap," Zara replied from her position at the Lucky Strike's communication console. "But if there really are 50 of our people in there, we have to try to save them." Jake docked at the station's main port while the other ships waited at the edges of the system. If this went wrong, at least some of their people would survive to continue the work. He and Zara walked through the familiar corridors toward the slave markets, but this time everything felt different. There were too many Vorthic guards, too many ships with military markings, too many eyes watching their every move. The slave market was larger than any Jake had seen before. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species stood behind energy barriers, all of them for sale to the highest bidder. But in the center of the main hall, in a special display area, were the Lyrians. Jake had never seen so many of them together. 50 beings with silver skin and violet eyes, standing quietly behind a shimmering force field. Some were young, barely past childhood. Others were old and scarred from years of hard use. But all of them had that same inner light that Jake had first seen in Zara, that same capacity for joy even in the darkest circumstances. "My people," Zara whispered, her hand pressed against the barrier. "Look how beautiful they are." The Vorthic trader who met them was not the same one Jake had dealt with before. This one was larger, with more scars and harder eyes. "You are Jake Morrison," he said. It was not a question. "I am," Jake replied. "Are you ready to make a deal?" "Oh, yes," the trader said, showing his sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "We are very ready to make a deal with you." The negotiation was a farce. Jake offered. His price, the trader countered. They haggled back and forth while Vorthic guards moved to surround them. Jake knew they would never leave this station as free beings, but he played along, hoping to buy time for something, anything that might. Save the LYRINS dot. Then Zara did something unexpected. She stepped up to the barrier and began to speak to the imprisoned Lyrians in their own language. Her voice was musical and gentle, but it carried clearly through the market. Other slaves stopped what they were doing to listen. Guards turned to watch. Even some of the buyers paused in their business to hear what she was saying. Jake did not understand the words, but he understood the effect. The 50 Lyrians behind the barrier began to stand straighter. Their eyes brightened. Smiles appeared on faces that had been blank with despair moments before. "What is she telling them?" the Vorthic trader demanded. "She is reminding them who they are," Jake said. Zara's speech grew stronger, more passionate. She was telling them about the crystal cities of their homeworld, about the songs their mothers used to sing, about the joy that lived inside every Lyrian heart. She was telling them that their happiness was real, that their nature was a gift, that they were not broken things to be bought and sold, but beings of light and love. The effect spread beyond just the Lyrians. Other slaves throughout the market began to listen, drawn by something in Zara's voice that spoke to the deepest parts of their souls. A human woman in chains started to cry, but they were tears of hope, not despair. An alien child reached through his cage to touch the barrier near where Zara stood. "Stop her," the Vorthic trader ordered his guards, but it was too late. Zara's words had already done their work. The 50 Lyrians were no longer broken slaves, waiting to be sold. They were Lyrians, proud and joyful and unafraid. When the guards moved toward Zara, the imprisoned Lyrians began to sing dot. It started with one voice, then two, then all 50 together. The song was in the old Lyrian language, one of the ancient melodies that Killen had taught them during the long months of rescue missions. It was a song about hope, about finding light in darkness, about the connections that bound all living things together. The song spread. Other slaves who did not know the words began to hum along. Guards stopped moving, caught by the beauty of the sound. Buyers stood transfixed, many of them experiencing something they had not felt in years. Jake felt it too. The song seemed to reach into his chest and touch something he had forgotten was there. It was the feeling he had when he first saw Zara smile, the feeling he got when he watched a freed Lyrian experience Troy for the first time. It was pure, undiluted joy, and it was the most powerful force he had ever encountered. The Vorthok trader was screaming orders, but his guards were not moving. Some of them had tears in their eyes. Others were smiling despite themselves. The song had stripped away their anger, their greed, their desire to cause harm, leaving only the basic goodness that lived inside every thinking being. "This is what we are," Zara said, speaking now in standard so everyone could understand. "This is what they tried to destroy. Not weapons or technology or military might, but joy, hope, the ability to find beauty even in the ugliest places. The power to choose love over hate, kindness over cruelty, connection over isolation." She turned to address the crowd that had gathered around the singing Lyrians. "They call us slaves, but how can you enslave joy itself? They sell our bodies, but they cannot sell our spirits. They cage our bodies, but they cannot cage our hearts." More voices joined the song. Humans who worked at the station, aliens who had come to buy slaves, even some of the Vorthok guards found themselves humming along. The market that had been a place of misery and exploitation was transformed into something else entirely. Jake realized that this was not about rescuing 50 Lyrians anymore. This was about something much bigger. This was about showing the galaxy what the Lyrians really were, what they had always been. Not objects to be bought and sold, but healers of the soul, reminders of what life could be when it was lived with purpose and joy. The station's security forces eventually restored order, but the damage was done. Videos of Zara's speech and the Lyrian song spread across the galactic network within hours. Humans on distant worlds watched Lyrian slaves singing with tears of joy streaming down their silver faces. Other species saw the transformation that happened when beings remembered their capacity for hope. Public opinion shifted overnight. Governments that had ignored the Lyrian slave trade suddenly found themselves facing angry citizens who demanded action. Buyers who had once seen Lyrians as exotic pets now saw them as people with their own dreams and desires. The market for Lyrian slaves collapsed as the galaxy woke up to what they had been supporting. Jake and Zara were arrested, of course, but not for long. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds demanding their release. Captain Roy and the other rescue Lyrians organized rescue missions to free them, but it turned out not to be necessary. The charges were dropped under pressure from human and alien rights groups. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of New Lyros, the colony world they had established for freed Lyrians. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see Zara working in the crystal gardens they had grown from seed salvage from their dead homeworld. She was teaching a group of young Lyrians how to sing the old songs, passing on the traditions that had almost been lost. "Do you ever regret it?" Zara asked him that evening as they sat together watching the sunset paint the crystal trees in shades of gold and silver. "Regret what?" Jake asked. "Buying me that first day." Starting all this, Jake thought about the question seriously. He thought about the loneliness that had driven him to that slave market, about the guilt he had felt at participating in something so wrong, about all the danger and hardship that had followed. Then he looked at Zara, at the pure joy that radiated from her like sunlight, at the community of free Lyrians they had helped create, at the changes their actions had sparked across the galaxy. "Never," he said. "I thought I was buying the companion, but instead I found something much more valuable." "What is that?" Zara asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. I found out what it means to be truly happy, Jake said. Not the temporary pleasure of getting something you want, but the deep satisfaction of becoming someone you can respect. You did not just show me joy, Zara. You showed me how to create it. As the last light faded from the sky, the crystal trees began to glow with their natural luminescence, just as they had on the original Lyros millions of years ago. In the distance, other freed Lyrians were gathering for the evening song. Their voices already began to weave together in harmonies that spoke of hope, love, and the unbreakable connections between all living things. Jake Morrison had started this journey as a lonely cargo pilot trying to buy some companionship. He was ending it as part of something much larger than himself, something that had changed not just his life, but the lives of... The first rescue happened almost by accident. Jake was delivering mining equipment to a small colony on Kepler Station when Zara spotted her. A Lyrian woman working in the cargo bay, loading heavy containers with mechanical precision. Her silver skin was dull by years of hard labor, and her white hair was cut short and practical. But when she looked up and saw Zara through the Lucky Strike's viewport, her violet eyes went wide with recognition. That is Nyx, Zara whispered, pressing her hand against the glass. I knew her when we were children. She taught me to braid flowers into crowns. Jake watched as the two Lyrian women stared at each other across the busy docking bay. Even from a distance, he could see the moment when joy sparked in Nyx's eyes. Not the careful happiness of a well-trained slave, but real deep joy at seeing someone from home. Her owner is Marcus Webb, Jake said, checking the shipping manifest. He runs a small cargo operation out of this station. One ship, basic routes, nothing fancy. Can we buy her? Zara asked. Jake looked at their account balance and winced. Buying Zara had used most of his savings, and cargo runs barely paid enough to keep the ship running. We do not have enough credits. But fate, or luck, or something else intervened. That evening in the station bar, Jake overheard Marcus Webb complaining to another trader about his debts. The man had lost money on bad investments and needed cash quickly. When Jake approached him about buying Nyx, Webb's eyes lit up with desperate hope. She is a good worker, Webb said, trying to drive up the price. Strong, never complains, follows orders perfectly. I am sure she is, Jake said, keeping his voice neutral. He offered half of what Nyx was worth according to market prices. Knowing it was all he could afford, Webb hesitated for only a moment before accepting. Within an hour, Jake owned another person, and he hated himself for it. But when they brought Nyx aboard the Lucky Strike, Jake saw something that made the guilt worth bearing. The moment Nyx stepped into their ship, she and Zara embraced like sisters. They spoke in rapid Lyrian, their musical language filling the ship with sounds Jake had never heard before. Both women were crying, but they were also laughing, and the joy that radiated from them was so pure it took Jake's breath away. She remembers the songs, Zara told Jake later, as Nyx explored her new room with the same wonder Zara had shown months earlier. All the old songs our mothers taught us. She has been singing them to herself for years, keeping them alive. Nyx adapted to freedom with the same natural joy that Zara had shown. She marveled at being able to choose her clothes, pick her food, decide how to spend her time. But more than that, she wanted to help find others. There is a Lyrian named Kellen on Frontier Base, she told him over dinner on their second night together. I heard his owner talking about selling him. He is old. Now, maybe 60 standard years, and his owner thinks he is not worth keeping. Jake did some research and found that Kellen belonged to a wealthy collector named Helen Cross. The woman treated her Lyrian more like a pet than a person, showing him off to friends and making him perform traditional Lyrian dances at her parties. When Jake contacted her about buying Kellen, she laughed. Why would you want that old thing? She asked. He is past his prime. No longer pretty enough for real entertainment. Jake offered her a reasonable price, and she accepted immediately. "You are doing me a favor," she said. "I was planning to have him put down anyway." When they picked up Kellen from Frontier Base, Jake understood why Helen Cross had considered him worthless. The old Lyrian moved slowly, his silver skin marked, with scars from years of rough treatment. His white hair was thin and patchy. But when he saw Zara and Nix waiting for him in the Lucky Strike's cargo bay, he straightened up and smiled with such radiant happiness that Jake felt tears in his own eyes. Kellen was a keeper of stories. While Nix remembered the songs, Kellen remembered the histories, the legends, the old tales that explained what it meant to be Lyrian. As their small ship traveled between stations, he told them stories of crystal cities that grew like living things, of forests where the trees shared emotions through their roots, of festivals where entire populations would laugh together until the sound could be heard across continents. "We were never a violent people," Kellen explained to Jake one evening as they sat together watching the stars. "Even when the Vorthik came with their weapons and their ships, we could not bring ourselves to fight back. Violence was so foreign to us that we literally did not know how to make war." "That does not seem like a weakness to me," Jake said. Kellen smiled. "The humans are beginning to understand us. That is good. We will need human help to save the others." By this time, they had rescued 5 more Lyrians. Each rescue was different. Each required careful planning and often more money than Jake could afford. He had to take dangerous cargo runs, haul illegal goods, and work with smugglers to earn enough credits. But every time he saw a new Lyrian step aboard his ship, every time he watched them experience freedom for the first time, he knew it was worth the risk. Dr. Lisa Chen joined their network after Jake delivered medical supplies to her research station. She was a xenobiologist who had studied Lyrian physiology for years, trying to understand how their emotional systems worked. When she met Zara and the others, she was amazed by what she learned. "Your people are not just naturally happy," she told Zara after running a series of tests. "Your brains are literally structured to find and create positive connections with other beings. You produce chemicals that most species only make during their happiest moments, and you produce them constantly. Is that why other species feel better around us?" Nix asked. "Exactly," Lisa said. "You are natural healers of emotional trauma. Just being near you makes other beings feel hope and joy. The Vorthik did not create this. They just found a way to exploit it." Captain Roy Henderson was an old military man who had left the service after seeing too much war. He now ran supplies to Outer Rim colonies. And when Jake approached him about helping rescue Lyrians, Roy's scarred face went thoughtful. "I have seen what the Vorthik do," Roy said. "Fought against them in the border wars. If you are trying to free their slaves, you have my support." Roy's ship was larger than the Lucky Strike, and he had contacts throughout the shipping networks. With his help, they were able to rescue Lyrians from places Jake could never have reached alone. But success brought danger. After their 5th tent rescue, Jake started noticing the same Vorthik ships in different ports. They were being watched, their movements tracked. The slave traders had realized that someone was systematically buying their Lyrian merchandise, and they were not happy about it. "We need to be more careful," Jake told the group during one of their planning meetings. The Lucky Strike now carried 12 Lyrians, and Roy's ship had taken on 8 more. "The Vorthik are getting suspicious." "Let them be suspicious," Zara said. Her voice carried a strength that had grown over the months of rescues. "We have given 20 of our people their freedom back. We have reminded them who they are. Even if they catch us now, it was worth it. But we are not done yet," Kellen added, his old eyes bright with purpose. "There are hundreds more out there, maybe thousands. They need to remember that their joy is real, that their nature is not a weakness but a gift." Jake looked around at the faces of the Lyrians in his crew. Each one glowed with the same inner light that had first attracted him to Zara. But now he understood that light for what it really was. It was not the artificial happiness of created slaves. It was the authentic joy of beings who had found their purpose, who were using their greatest gift to heal a galaxy that had forgotten how to hope. Jake stared at the navigation charts for the 100th time that morning. The cargo run to Titan 7 could wait another few days. There was somewhere else he needed to go first. Somewhere he had been thinking about since Zara mentioned her homeworld in passing 3 nights ago. Lyros Prime, he said to himself, reading the coordinates from the old star charts. The planet was listed as dead, destroyed by orbital bombardment 15 years ago. But there was a research station nearby, abandoned but still functional according to the shipping databases. Jake? Zara appeared in the doorway of the cockpit. Is everything okay? You seem worried. He turned to face her. Over the past month, she had become even more beautiful, but it was not her silver skin or violet eyes that struck him now. It was the way she carried herself, the confidence that had grown from weeks of making her own choices. She no longer moved like someone who was owned. Zara, would you like to see your homeworld? Jake asked out. Her face went very still. Lyros Prime is gone, she said quietly. The Vorthic made sure everyone knew what happened to planets that resisted too long. I know it is gone, Jake said, but there is a research station nearby. Maybe. There are records, information about your people from before the war. Would you want to see that? Zara was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I remember some things, pieces, crystal cities that sang in the wind, forests where the trees glowed at night. My mother's voice telling stories about the old days. Then we go, Jake said, already inputting the new coordinates. The journey took 5 days. During that time, Zara became quieter than usual. She still helped around the ship, still smiled when Jake taught her new things. But there was something different in her eyes. A sadness that had not been there before, mixed with something that looked like Hope Dot, the research station orbiting the dead planet, was exactly what Jake had expected. Dark, cold, and empty. Emergency power kept life support running, but most systems had been shut down years ago. The station's computers still worked, though, and that was what mattered. They docked the Lucky Strike and walked through the empty corridors together. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. Through the station's main viewport, they could see Lyros Prime below them. What had once been a green and blue world was now brown and gray, its atmosphere poisoned, its cities melted. To Glass Dot, Zara stood at the viewport for a long time, staring down at the ruins of her world. Jake waited beside her, not knowing what to say. It was beautiful once, she finally said. More beautiful than anything you have ever seen. They found the research lab and managed to power up the main computers. The databases were intact, full of information about Lyrian culture, history, and biology. Jake watched Zara's face as she read through file after file, her eyes growing wider with each discovery. Jake, she said, her voice shaking. The Vorthic lied about everything. What do you mean? Zara pointed at the screen. They said we were bred for companionship, that they improved our natural traits to make us better slaves. But look at this. The files showed the truth about Lyrian society before the conquest. They had been one of the most emotionally advanced species in the galaxy, naturally empathetic and joyful. Their cities were built around the concept of shared happiness. There, art, music, and literature all celebrated the connections between living beings. We were not made to be companions, Zara said, tears running down her silver cheeks. We were companions by nature. The Vorthic did not create our capacity for joy and love. They just found a way to profit from it. Jake read through more files, his anger growing with each page. The Lyrians had not been a primitive species conquered by superior technology. They had been a peaceful, advanced civilization that refused to fight back because violence went against their fundamental nature. The Vorthic had used this against them, taking their children and selling them across the galaxy. There are others, Zara said, pointing to shipping records. Thousands of my people scattered across dozens of worlds. all of them sold as companions or servants. Jake found records of Lyrian slaves throughout the outer systems. Some were owned by wealthy families on core worlds. Others worked in mines or factories on frontier planets. A few had been bought by collectors who treated them like exotic pets. They all still carry the joy, Zara said, reading psychological profiles from various slave markets. Even after years of captivity, most Lyrians maintain their natural happiness. The buyers think it is training or genetic modification, but it is just who we are. Who you are, Jake said. Zara, the happiness you show, the way you find joy in simple things, that is not because you were made to be a slave. That is because you are Lyrian. She turned away from the computer and looked at him. I remember more now. My mother used to say that happiness shared is happiness doubled. My father taught me that finding beauty in small things was the secret to surviving hard times. I thought those were just things parents told children, but they were teaching me to be Lyrian. They spent hours going through the files together. Jake learned about Lyrian festivals where entire cities would sing together, creating harmonies that could be heard from orbit. He read about their philosophy of emotional connection, their belief that all living things were part of a vast web of feeling and experience. This is why I was not broken by slavery, Zara said, understanding dawning in her violet eyes. This is why I could find happiness with you, even though I was bought and sold like an object. Joy is not something that was done to me. It is something I am. Jake found shipping logs that showed where other Lyrians had been taken. The records were years old, but they provided starting points for finding her people. He watched Zara study. The information saw the determination growing in her face. I want to find them, she said. Not to leave you, but to help them remember who they are. If they are like me, they are finding ways to be happy even in captivity. But they might not know why. They might not know that their joy is real, not programmed. That would be dangerous, Jake said. The Vorthic do not like losing their property. If we start freeing slaves, they will come after us. Zara looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. There was still gentleness in her eyes, still that fundamental kindness that made her who she was. But there was also strength and purpose and something that looked almost like fire. Jake, for the first time in my life, I understand what I am, she said. I am not a slave who learned to be happy. I am not a companion built to please others. I am a Lyrian, and my people's greatest gift is our ability to find and share joy even in the darkest places. How can I keep that gift to myself when others are suffering? Jake looked at the shipping records, at the long list of Lyrian slaves scattered across the galaxy. He thought about what Pete had said back on New Angeles Station, about participating in something wrong. He thought about Zara's smile when she first saw her room, about her joy at choosing what music to play, about her tears as she learned the truth about her people. Where do we start? He asked. Zara's smile was brighter than any star Jake had ever seen. It was the smile of someone who had found her purpose, her reason for being. It was the smile of a Lyrian who was about to share her gift with the galaxy. Jake's ship was not large, but it was home. The Lucky Strike had 2 small bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, a living area, and the cockpit where he spent most of his time. As they walked aboard, Jake watched Zara's reaction to everything around her. Her violet eyes moved constantly, taking in details he had stopped noticing years ago. This is your room, Jake said, opening the door to the smaller bedroom. He had quickly moved his spare equipment out and put clean sheets on the bed. You can do whatever you want with it. Change things, move things around, whatever makes you comfortable. Zara stepped inside and looked around. The room was plain, with just a bed, a small desk, and a closet. But when she turned back to Jake, her face showed something he had not expected. She was smiling. "This is mine?" she asked. Her voice was soft and musical, with an accent he could not place. "Yes," Jake said, "all yours." She walked to the small window and looked out at the stars. Her smile grew wider. I can see space from here. Jake found her reaction strange. Most people took windows for granted, but Zara stared at the view like it was the most amazing thing she had ever seen. He left her to explore and went to the kitchen to make dinner. 20 minutes later, Zara appeared in the doorway. She had been looking through the closet and found some of his old clothes. She was now wearing a blue shirt that was too big for her and a pair of pants she had rolled up at the bottom. She looked happy about this too. I hope it is okay, she said, pulling at the shirt. The gray clothes felt wrong. Of course it is okay, Jake said. Those clothes are yours now. Take whatever you want from anywhere on the ship. Her eyes went wide. Anything? Anything, Jake confirmed. She spent the next hour exploring the ship like a child in a toy store. She touched everything gently, as if she could not believe she was allowed to. When she found Jake's music collection, she asked if she could listen to it. When he said yes, she spent 20 minutes going through different songs, her face lighting up with each new sound. This one, she said, playing an old Earth song about flying. This one makes me feel like the music is alive inside me. Jake made dinner while she listened to music. He had prepared food for one person for so long that making a meal for two felt strange. When he called her to eat, she came running like she had been waiting her whole life for someone to invite her to dinner. Food was simple, just protein bars processed into something that looked like real meat and vegetables from the ship's small garden. But Zara ate like it was the finest meal in the galaxy. She asked about every ingredient, every spice, every flavor. On the station, they gave us nutrition paste, she said between bites. It had everything a body needs, but it all tasted the same. This has so many different tastes. After dinner, Jake showed her how to use the ship's entertainment system. She discovered old Earth movies and became fascinated by the stories. She asked endless questions about human culture, about Earth, about why people in the movies made the choices they did. Do all humans cry when they are happy? She asked after watching a movie about a wedding. Sometimes, Jake said, when something is very beautiful or meaningful, we cry even when we are not sad. Zara nodded seriously, as if this was important information she needed to remember. Over the next few days, as Jake piloted the ship toward his next delivery, Zara continued to surprise him. She asked if she could help with small tasks around the ship. When he said yes, she threw herself into every job like it was the most important thing in the galaxy. She organized his tools, cleaned areas he had ignored for months, and even learned to help with basic ship maintenance. But it was her reaction to simple choices that amazed Jake the most. When he asked what she wanted for breakfast, she stared at him for a full minute before answering. When he told her she could rearrange her room however she liked, she spent hours moving the desk and bed to different positions until she found what she called the perfect spot. I have never chosen where to put furniture before, she explained when Jake asked about all the moving. It feels important. Jake taught her to play chess, thinking it would help pass time during the long journey. Zara learned the rules quickly. But what interested her most was not winning or losing. She loved the moment when she had to choose which piece to move. She would study the board for long minutes, not because the choice was difficult, but because she was savoring the fact that the choice was hers to make. Each move creates a different story, she said during one game. I get to decide which story we tell. 3 weeks into their journey, Jake realized something that troubled him. He had expected Zara to be sad or angry or broken by her time. As a slave, instead she seemed genuinely happy. Not the fake happiness of someone trying to please their owner, but real joy that seemed to come from inside her. One evening, as they ate dinner and listened to music, Jake decided to ask the question that had been bothering him. Zara, are you happy here? She stopped eating and looked at him with those large violet eyes. Yes, she said simply. But you are still not free, Jake said. I own you, according to the law. Does that not make you angry? Zara was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. You asked me what I want for meals, she said. You let me choose my clothes, my music, where to put my bed. You teach me games and show me movies. You treat me like my thoughts and feelings matter. How is that not freedom? Because you cannot leave, Jake said. If you wanted to go somewhere else, to be with other people, I could stop you. Could you? Zara asked. Would you? Jake thought about this. The honest answer was no. If Zara wanted to leave, he would help her go. But the legal answer was different. The law says I could, he admitted. Then we will not worry about what the law says, Zara said, smiling. We will worry about what Jake Morrison does. That night, Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about what Zara had said. She had found happiness in situations that should have made her miserable. She had taken his small gestures of kindness and built a whole new life around them. When he finally did sleep, Jake dreamed about Zara's smile when she saw her room for the first time. He dreamed about the way she had listened to music like it was magic. He dreamed about her joy at choosing which piece to move in chess.dot in his dreams. Jake began to understand that he had not bought a slave or even a companion. He had somehow found someone who could teach him things about happiness that he had never known. Someone who could find joy in the smallest freedoms and make them into something beautiful. When he woke up the next morning, Zara was already in the kitchen, humming while she made breakfast. She looked up when he entered and smiled that same bright smile he had seen that first day. Good morning, Jake, she said. I made your favorite. Jake realized she was right. Somehow, without him, even noticing, she had learned what he liked best. And somehow, without him realizing it, his ship had stopped feeling empty. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked through the crowded corridors of New Angeles Space Station. His cargo run to the mining colonies had paid well, better than he had hoped. The credits in his account felt heavy, even though they were just numbers on a screen. He had been saving for months, working double shifts and taking the dangerous routes that other pilots avoided. The lower levels of the station smelled different. Up in the main commercial areas, everything was clean and bright. Down here, the air carried strange scents from 100 different worlds. Alien vendors called out in languages he did not understand. Humans walked alongside creatures he had only seen in data files. This was where the real business happened, away from the official trade offices and government inspectors. Jake had been alone for 3 years now. His wife left him when he chose the spacer life over settling down on Earth. His few friends were scattered across the galaxy, following their own cargo routes. The silence in his ship, the lucky strike, had become too much to bear. Every meal alone, every conversation with the ship's computer, every night staring at the stars through the viewport reminded him of how empty his life had become. He found the shop he was looking for in a dark corner of the market. The sign outside was written in Vortic script, but Jake knew what it meant. Everyone who came to these levels knew what the Vortic sold. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Jake stepped inside. The Vortic trader was tall and thin, with gray skin and many joints in his arms. His eyes were black as space, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. Human male seeks companionship, yes? I have best selection in this sector. All legal, all properly documented. Jake nodded. He felt sick about being here. But the loneliness had won. I want to see what you have. The trader led him through a series of rooms. Each one held different species behind energy barriers. Jake saw creatures he recognized and others that were completely alien. Some looked at him with hope in their eyes. Others stared at the floor. A few watched him with hatred so pure it made him step back. Most customers prefer the modified ones, the trader said as they walked. Easier to manage, more predictable. But you look like someone who wants something special. They entered a larger room at the back of the shop. Inside was a single barrier, and behind it sat a woman. At least, she looked like a woman. Her skin was pale silver, and her hair fell in white waves to her shoulders. She was tall and graceful, even sitting on the simple bench they had given her. But it was her eyes that caught Jake's attention. They were violet, large, and beautiful. And they held something he had not expected to see in this place. Lyrian female, the trader said with pride in his voice. From the best breeding programs, these were made for companionship. Naturally empathetic, naturally devoted. This one is young, barely past maturity. She will bond with you completely. Jake stared at the woman. She was looking directly back at him, not at the floor like most of the others. There was no fear in her eyes, no hatred. Instead, there was something that looked almost like curiosity. "What is her name?" Jake asked. "Names are for owners to give," the trader replied. But her breeding designation was Zara 779. "Zara," Jake said softly. The woman's eyes brightened slightly when he spoke. The trader noticed this and smiled, showing too many sharp teeth. "See, already responding to you. These Lyrians were designed perfectly. After their world fell, we improved on their natural traits. They lived to make their owners happy." Something about the way the trader said improved made Jake's stomach turn. He looked at Zara again. She was still watching him, and now she tilted her head slightly, as if she was trying to figure him out. "How much?" Jake asked. The trader quoted a price that was exactly what Jake had in his account. It was not a coincidence. These people knew how to read their customers, knew how much they were willing to spend. "I need to think about this," Jake said. But even as he spoke, he knew he was going to buy her. The loneliness had been eating at him for too long. "Of course," the trader said. "But do not think too long. I have other interested parties." Jake nodded and left the shop. He walked through the station's corridors for an hour, trying to talk himself out of it. He stopped at a bar and ordered a drink, hoping the alcohol would either give him courage or convince him to leave. Instead, he found himself sitting next to Pete Collins, another cargo pilot he knew from the shipping lanes. "Jake," Pete said, slapping him on the back. "What brings you to this part of the station?" Jake did not want to admit where he had been, but Pete was persistent. Finally, Jake told him about the Lyrian woman. Pete's face went serious. "Jake, you do not want to get involved in that business. Those slave traders are bad news, and buying a person? That is not who you are." "She is not human," Jake said, but the words felt wrong even as he spoke them. "Does that matter?" Pete asked. "You saw her eyes. You know she is a thinking being. How is that different from slavery?" Jake knew Pete was right, but he also knew he could not go back to his ship alone again. The silence would kill him, slowly but surely. "Maybe I can help her," Jake said. "Maybe I can give her a better life than she would have with someone else." Pete shook his head. "That is what they all tell themselves." "But you are still buying a person, Jake. You are still participating in something wrong." They argued for another hour, but Jake's mind was made up. He finished his drink and walked back to the trader's shop. The Vorthik was waiting for him, as if he had never doubted Jake would return. "I will take her," Jake said. The transaction took only minutes. Credits transferred from Jake's account to the trader's. Legal documents were signed and sealed. Ownership papers were printed and handed over. Just like that, Jake Morrison owned another thinking being. The trader led Zara out of her cell. She was taller than Jake had realized, nearly 6 feet. She moved with a fluid grace that reminded him of dancers he had seen on Earth. She was wearing a simple gray outfit that looked more like a uniform than clothing. "She is yours now," the trader said. "Full ownership, no restrictions. Do whatever you wish with her." Jake looked at the papers in his hand, then at Zara. She was standing quietly, her violet eyes still focused on his face. There was no fear there, no resignation. If anything, she looked interested in what would happen next. "Come on," Jake said. To her, "Let us get out of here." As they walked through the station toward Jake's ship, Zara stayed close beside him. She did not speak, but Jake could feel her watching everything around them with intense curiosity. When they passed a window that looked out into space, she stopped for a moment and stared at the stars with wonder. Jake realized that despite his guilt about buying her, despite Pete's warnings, despite everything that felt wrong about this situation, he was already beginning to care what happened to this strange, beautiful woman walking beside him.